My name is Ethan. I was born in a poor area. Life was never easy. Dreams were far away. My mother was kind. She worked so hard. She was always tired, but she never gave up. We lived in a small house with one room, no hot water, no good lights. I slept on the floor. I used an old blanket. The roof leaked, but I never complained. At age 14, I started working. I washed cars, I carried boxes, I cleaned the streets. I did everything I could. I brought home money. I gave it to Mom. I asked for nothing. She always smiled at me, touched my face gently, said I was her hero, her strong boy. I didn't feel strong. I felt tired. I felt small. But I smiled for her. Every morning I woke up early, washed my face, wore old clothes, left the house quietly. I walked through dust, past broken buildings, saw kids playing, but I kept walking. I watched rich people in cars, listened to their music, saw their clean shoes, and stayed silent. I didn't hate them. I just wondered why life is so different for some people. One day my mom got sick. She coughed a lot. She had pain. She couldn't walk. We had no money. No doctor came. I sat beside her, held her hand, and cried. She told me, "Don't be sad." She smiled weakly. She said, "Keep going. You are strong." That night, she died, in her sleep, in my arms, with peace on her face. I felt empty. The house was cold. The world was quiet. My heart was heavy. I had no one left, no family, no friend. Just a photo of her in my pocket. I stayed strong. I left that house. I said goodbye. And I walked toward a new life. I promised her I would try, I would be honest, I would be brave, I would never give up. I found a job as a security guard in a big house outside the city. The house was huge, with glass windows, big gardens, and quiet roads. The owners were rich, very private. They had cameras, they had gates. I stayed outside near the gate, sitting on a chair, watching the street. The wife, Mrs. Helen, was kind. She smiled often. She gave me tea and asked about my day. The husband was busy. He didn't speak much, always on calls, always in a rush. They had a son, around 20. He looked angry. He never said hello, just walked past. I didn't mind. I had a job, a small room, a little money, and some peace. I woke up every day at 4, brushed my teeth, put on my uniform, and sat at the gate. I stayed until midnight. I watched the house. I wrote in my notebook. I stayed alert. Sometimes I read books, old ones found in trash. They had torn pages, but I loved them. I wanted to learn, to grow, to be more than a guard, to be something one day. One morning, everything changed. Something happened. Something dark. Something terrible. I opened the gate as usual. The sun was rising. The street was quiet, my eyes still sleepy. Suddenly, police cars came, loud sirens, flashing lights, men shouting. They ran inside the house, broke the door, pointed guns, told me to freeze. I didn't move. I raised my hands. I said nothing. I was shocked. After minutes, they came out. They looked scared, their faces pale. They found the family all dead inside the house, in pools of blood. I felt sick. My hands shook, my knees weak. I couldn't breathe. They looked at me. They shouted questions. They didn't wait. They took my arms. I was pushed down, handcuffed fast, pulled into a car, still in my uniform. They said I was the only one there. No cameras worked, no other witness. I told them I didn't do it. I begged them. I cried. But they didn't care. They took my fingerprints. They searched my room. They found nothing. But they said my hands had blood. The door had no marks. I was inside. They showed pictures, the horror, the mess, the pain. I covered my eyes. I wanted to wake up, but this was real. The questions didn't stop. The faces didn't change. All cold, all serious. I was just a guard. I had no weapons, no reason, no hate. I told them I respected the family. I loved Mrs. Helen. She was kind. But they wrote reports. They shook heads. They closed the case quickly. I was alone. No lawyer, no support. No one believed me. They gave me a lawyer from the state. He didn't care. He barely spoke. In court, I looked around. No family, no friends, no hope. I stood up. I said I was innocent, but my voice was small. The judge looked bored, the jury looked tired, the lawyer didn't fight. I heard the word guilty. I heard life in prison. I fell to the floor. I was only 23. No one cried, no one shouted, no one cared. The guards took me, the doors closed, and my new life began. Prison was cold, dark, and full of noise, but also full of silence. Doors slammed hard. Keys rattled fast. Guards shouted names. Lights blinked. I had no words, no strength, no smile, just a deep hole in my chest. I sat on the floor, looked at the wall, and cried until I had no more tears. My cell was small, with one bed, one toilet, one broken light, and a metal door. The mattress was thin, the blanket was rough, the pillow was flat. Nothing felt soft. I shared the cell with another man. He didn't talk much, just watched me quietly. He asked one day, "What are you in for?" I said, "I didn't do it." He laughed, not to be mean, but because he had heard it before, many times. He said, "We all say that," then turned around and went to sleep. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling. I remembered my mother's voice. She used to say, "Even in the dark you can find light." I held on to that. Her words, her love, her hope, they became my guide. I didn't want to die inside. I didn't want to become a ghost. I wanted to live. So I stood up, wiped my face, breathed deeply, and promised myself to survive. I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan. But I had a reason. Her memory. In prison, time is slow. Hours feel like days. Days feel like months. Years feel like forever. Each morning we lined up, got bad food, sat in silence, or listened to angry voices. Some men fought over nothing. Some cried in corners. Some stared into space, lost. I kept quiet. I kept calm. I stayed to myself. I watched, listened, learned. I found a small library inside, dusty books, old chairs, quiet walls. The librarian was a kind man. Gray hair, soft eyes, he didn't ask much. He gave me books, simple ones first, then harder ones, day by day. I read and read. Each word gave me power. Each page gave me light. I learned how to write, how to spell, how to speak better, how to ask questions. I started writing letters, not to anyone, just to the wind, to the world, to myself. I wrote about my life, my mother, the job, the house, the night everything changed. I wrote about pain, hope, dreams, lies, and the deep silence in my heart. Some nights I cried again, when no one saw, when the walls felt close. But I didn't break. I didn't lose myself. I held on to something stronger. I started helping others, teaching letters, reading with them, listening to their stories. Many of them were broken but not bad, just lost, just forgotten. Years passed, slow like winter, heavy like wet clothes, but I kept walking through it. I didn't count the days anymore. I just focused on each moment, each breath. Then one day, something strange happened. Something small, but full of hope. A volunteer came in, a young woman, soft voice, big smile, books in her hand. She sat in the library, asked for help, wanted someone to fix old books. I offered my help, shy at first, quiet, but she smiled and said, "Thank you." She asked about my story. I hesitated, then gave her my notebook full of pages. She read it slowly, every line, every word. Her eyes filled with tears. She said, "This needs to be shared," I said. "No one will care." She said, "I care." And those two words opened something inside me. She showed the notebook to a lawyer, one who helps people in prison. He read everything, took notes, asked questions, and said, "We'll see what we can do." At first I didn't believe him. I had heard promises before, empty and cold. But he returned, again and again, asked for files, old reports, pictures, fingerprints. He worked with a team, checked everything, even the evidence from that night. He said something was wrong. The story didn't make sense. The pieces didn't fit. He asked the court to open the case. It took months, many papers, many meetings. But after 12 long years, something happened. Something big. They found DNA on the broken glass, on the doorknob, on a cup inside the house. That DNA wasn't mine. It was someone else's. Someone the family knew. They ran the test, matched it with names, and found the truth. A friend of the son. He had a record, drug problems, money issues, and was close to the family. He had disappeared after the crime, moved away, changed his name, started over. But the truth doesn't stay quiet forever. It finds a way, like light through cracks. The news came to me in the library. The lawyer stood there, shaking, smiling. He said, "You're going home." I dropped the book. My hands shook. I couldn't speak. I asked, "Are you sure?" He nodded, eyes wet. He said, "You are free." After 12 years, 12 winters, 12 lonely birthdays, I was finally going home. They opened the cell. The guard looked at me, different this time, softer. I walked through the hall, past men who cheered, who clapped, who cried for me. Some whispered, "You did it." Some said, "Don't forget us." I nodded, heart full. I stepped outside for the first time in years and felt the sun on my face again. I didn't have a bag, no suitcase, no jacket, just my notebook and a deep breath. No one waited for me, no mother, no home, no old friend, just the sky. But I didn't feel empty. I felt alive. I felt ready. I felt something I forgot. Freedom. And I said to myself, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. I stood outside the prison. The sun was bright. The air was fresh. I felt free. No one was there. No mother. No friend. No one waiting for me. I had no home, no phone, no money, just an old notebook in my hand. I looked up at the sky, smiled a little, and started walking slowly. The city looked different. The people looked busy. The world had changed. I watched cars pass, children laugh, music play from far away. I sat on a bench, watched people live, watched birds fly over my head. I felt strange, happy but also empty, alive but also tired. My legs hurt, my stomach was empty, but my heart was still beating. I asked a man for water. He said nothing, just walked away fast. Then I saw a small shop with bread in the window and went inside. The woman inside looked kind. So I said, "Please, I'm hungry, no money." She looked at me, quiet for a moment, then gave me a small loaf of bread. She poured tea in a cup, smiled, and said, "Sit, eat, rest a little." I thanked her. I almost cried. I hadn't felt kindness in years. That tea was warm, that bread was soft, and I felt hope again. I told her, "I'll come back one day. I'll pay you back, I promise." She just smiled and said, "You're already paying me by being kind." I left the shop with a full heart and walked without a plan. Every step was a new chapter, every face a small reminder of life. That night, I had no place to go, so I walked until I found a church. It was old, quiet, the door open, no one inside but me. I sat in the back, cold and tired, then lay on the floor to rest. I hugged my notebook close, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." The next day, I woke up early, stretched my arms, and smiled. I walked to a small park, looked for work, asked people if they needed help. Most said no, some ignored me, one man told me to go away. But then, an old man with a broom said, "Come here, you can help me." He cleaned the park every day, slowly, with care and pride. He gave me a broom, showed me how to clean, and smiled kindly. We worked in silence. Sometimes he hummed, sometimes he told jokes. At the end of the day, he gave me a sandwich and some coins. He said, "You work hard, I like that. Come tomorrow again." And I did every day for weeks, cleaning, sweeping, learning. He told me, "You have strong hands, a good heart. Don't give up." I told him about prison, about my story, and he didn't judge me. He said, I know pain too. Everyone carries something. One day he saw my notebook, asked, "What do you write in there?" I said, "My life, my thoughts, my story, it helps me breathe." He nodded and said, "The world needs to hear this. People need hope." He had a friend, a teacher at a small center who helps people speak. He took me there, introduced me, said, "This man has something to say." She smiled at me, listened to my voice, and said, "Come next week." That week, I prepared. I wrote my words again and again. When the day came, I stood in front of 12 people, nervous and shaking. My hands were cold, my heart fast, but I began to speak. I told them everything, from the beginning, my mother, my pain, the prison. I told them about hope, about reading, about dreams in the dark. They listened in silence, some with open mouths, some with wet eyes. When I finished, one woman clapped, then another, then all of them. They hugged me, thanked me, said, "Your story is powerful. Don't stop." I walked home that night with light in my heart. Something new had begun. The teacher told others, and soon more people wanted to hear my story. I spoke in libraries, in schools, in small halls with folding chairs. Every place I went, I saw new faces, new hearts opening. People cried, people clapped, people hugged me like family. One night, after a talk, a woman came to me with a notebook. She said, "I'm a writer. I want to help you write your story." We sat together for weeks, remembering every part, every feeling. She wrote it all, carefully, slowly, page after page, truth after truth. We called it "The Boy Who Kept Walking," and it felt right. A small publisher agreed to print it, said, "This needs to be shared." I didn't believe it, not at first, until I saw my name on the cover. When I held the book in my hands, I cried. I couldn't speak. The book went out, one copy at a time. People read it. People shared it. I got letters, emails, messages from strangers saying, "You gave me hope." One woman wrote, "My son is in prison. Your story made me believe again." Another said, "I wanted to give up, but your words saved me." The story grew, faster than I could understand, bigger than I imagined. I was invited to events, to speak to crowds, to share the truth. I stood on stages, not as a hero, not as a star, but as a survivor. I told them, pain is real, but so is hope, and you are not alone. Some people didn't believe it, said, "It's too sad, too lucky." But most people cried, thanked me, held my hand, and said, "Keep going." The world was listening, not just to me, but to all the forgotten ones. And I promised I would never stop speaking for those who can't. Days passed, weeks turned into months, and my story reached more people. I started traveling, speaking in cities far away from home to places I'd never seen. It wasn't easy, traveling alone, staying in strange places, but I felt alive. Every time I spoke, every person I met, it was like I was building something new. I met other survivors, people with their own stories of pain and hope. One man, named Daniel, had been through worse than me, yet he smiled every day. He told me, "The past doesn't define us, but how we move forward does." Those words stayed with me. I shared them every chance I got. My book was growing, people were buying it, reading it, passing it on. I received messages from readers in different languages, across the world. They said they felt less alone, that they were finally seen, heard. It felt like a dream, but I knew it wasn't. It was real. It was happening. There were moments of doubt, days when I felt tired, like I couldn't continue. Sometimes I would wonder, is this all real? Is this really my life now? But every time I saw someone's eyes light up, every time they said, "Thank you," I knew the answer, yes. This is real. This is my purpose. This is why I kept walking. I started getting invited to more important events, bigger stages, brighter lights. Once I spoke at a university in front of hundreds of students, future leaders. I shared my story, the pain, the redemption, and the importance of not giving up. At the end, a young woman came up to me, tears in her eyes, and hugged me. She whispered, "You've changed my life. I was about to give up on my dreams." Those words meant more than any book or speech ever could. It wasn't about fame, money, or applause. It was about touching lives. And I realized that's the real reward. That's what makes it all worth it. I still remember the first time I walked on a big stage in front of a crowd. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, I almost couldn't speak. But then I remembered my story, my pain, my lessons, and I began to talk. I spoke of strength, of surviving, of the light after the darkest nights. After that speech, something changed. People started calling me a hero. But I didn't see it that way. I was just a man who kept moving forward. A man who refused to let the world break him, who refused to let hope die. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who wanted to share what he had learned. The invitations kept coming, and so did the questions. How did you survive? The truth was simple but hard to explain. It wasn't about strength. It was about hope. Hope that things could change. Hope that pain wasn't forever. Hope that I wasn't alone. And every time I told that story, I saw it in the eyes of others. They understood. As I traveled more, I learned about the world's pain, its struggles, its injustices. I met people who were fighting for their rights, fighting for their freedom. I saw children with no food, families living on the streets, people in prisons. I began to think maybe my story wasn't the only one that needed to be heard. So I decided to do more, to help in ways I never imagined before. I started a foundation to help people like me, people who had been wronged, lost, forgotten. We provided support, guidance, and most importantly, we gave them hope. It was small at first, but slowly it grew. People began to believe again. I visited prisons. I spoke to families. I met people who had lost everything. I sat with them, listened to their stories, shared mine, and said, "You are not alone." Every time I gave someone a little piece of hope, I felt like I was healing too. It wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about all of us, together. I met with young men and women who had been through their own battles. Some had been in prison, some had lost loved ones, some had no homes. I told them, "You can change your life. You can rise above the pain." And they listened. They believed. And they started to take steps towards their dreams. One day, I received a letter from a mother whose son was in prison. She thanked me for giving her hope, for making her believe that he would come home. She said my words had helped her son, that he was starting to write again, starting to dream.
That letter made me cry because it wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs too.
I kept writing, I kept speaking, and I kept helping, because that was my purpose. I didn't know where this journey would take me, but I knew I couldn't stop. Every life I touched, every person who found hope in my words, made it all worth it. I was no longer just Ethan, the boy who was wrongly accused. I was something more. Years passed, and I kept speaking. I met more people, heard more stories, and shared more hope. Every day, I learned something new about life and strength. I was no longer just a survivor. I had become a guide for others. I saw lives change, dreams rebuilt, and spirits rise. And in every smile, every tear of joy, I found my purpose. Through pain and suffering, I found redemption. I had walked through darkness, but now I lived in the light,